AntonioGarciaBooks.com presents Carjacked, written and read by Antonio Garcia. Become a patron on Patreon to see the behind-the-scenes recording of this podcast. And please take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll give you a shout-out in a future episode. As Clyde drove down the lonely country road, the music droned on, and his eyes started to get heavy. If he had come across a motel at any time, he would have pulled over and got a room for the night, but so far, the road was empty as far as he could see. When he saw blinking lights up ahead, he was a little envious that they had seemed to be broken down. It's not that he wanted to be broken down himself, but then at least he would have an excuse to sleep until morning, when he would have to look for help. As he approached the broken down car, he saw a woman waving her arms, attempting to draw him to her aid. He slowed his speed and slowly came to a stop about 20 feet from the woman and the broken down car. Feeling a little bit like a hero, he got out of the car and gave a friendly wave to the woman, who seemed excited that another person came down the road to help her. She graciously waved back and took a few steps towards him. "Thank you so much for stopping," she said, bouncing a little. Trying to put on a heroic facade, he said, "How can I be of assistance?" "My car broke down and I'm stranded," she explained. "I didn't think anybody would come to help me. You're the only car I've seen all night." "Well, let's see if I can't get this thing started," Clyde replied. Thoughts of her car not working and having to take her to a motel ran through his mind. He knew he wasn't an overly handsome man, but he felt that given the right circumstances, he had a lot to offer. He pretended that he knew what he was doing around cars as he leaned over to evaluate the engine. Except for the smoke, he couldn't see anything wrong with it. "Well, it looks like your gasket is busted," he lied. He had no idea what was actually wrong, but she didn't seem to know any better. "Oh no," she said, obviously not liking the sound of that. "Can you give us a ride into town?" "Us?" Clyde asked. As if on cue, a man came out of the shadows pointing a gun at him. Clyde looked at the girl, whose expression had changed from a damsel in distress to that of the man's accomplice. "We're so happy you stopped, mister," the man said sarcastically. "Are you going to kill me?" Clyde asked. "Nah," the man replied. "Not as long as you do as we say. I doubt you have much money on you, but if you want to live, you'll ride with us into town to the nearest ATM, and if you don't try anything, we'll let you walk after that." Not having any other options, Clyde agreed not to cause any trouble. The man shoved him in the front passenger seat. The girl got behind the wheel, and the man sat in the back seat behind Clyde, keeping the gun pointed at his back. "Drive, sweetheart," the man said. Obediently, she put the car in drive and stepped on the gas. As they drove down the road, the man and woman were a little confused how the man they just carjacked was remaining so calm. The silence in the car was just adding to the discomfort, so the man told the woman to turn on the radio. She turned it on, and it wasn't long until they found a station that was playing some rock. Clyde began bobbing his head to the music, as if he was in a car with friends, and not in a car with armed carjackers. The woman gave a concerned look to the man in the back through the rearview mirror. There was almost a sense of relief when they both saw a sign that said the town was only a few miles up the road. Without any warning, Clyde grabbed the wheel, cranking it to the right. The car swerved sharply, knocking the man and woman to their sides. Clyde had noticed when they started moving that neither the man nor the woman were wearing their seatbelts. The car didn't slow much before it crashed into a tree, causing the woman to hit her head on the steering wheel and the man to bang his head on the back of Clyde's seat. He knew the man in the back wouldn't be injured much, and since he was prepared for the impact, Clyde was able to quickly undo his seatbelt, open the glove box, pull out a billy club, turn and whack the man, knocking him unconscious. The whole maneuver took less than 30 seconds. When the man regained consciousness, he looked around groggily, confused how he'd woken up to find himself tied to a post inside what looked like a barn. "What the fuck?" the man yelled, once he came completely to. Clyde stood at a table, playing with some farming tools he had collected. He didn't seem to bother to look at the irate man tied to a post. Seeing Clyde pick up a very sharp object and inspect it, the man went from being very irate to afraid. "This is my favorite part," Clyde said, moving the sharp object around in the air, still not looking at the man. The anticipation. The man almost wet himself, and was actually envious of the woman who was still unconscious. "I know what you're thinking," Clyde started. "You're thinking she is better off because she is still unconscious. But I can assure you, it's been my experience that waking up to being mutilated is far worse than seeing it happen. At least when you see it, your mind can process it. When you wake up to it, your horror is only emphasized by the confusion." Having made his point, Clyde slowly walked towards the man, making sure the sharp tool was visible the entire time. "I think I may start with you," he said. The man couldn't hide his fear. When he had first approached Clyde, he seemed timid and easily scared, but looking into his eyes now, he saw a blackness that wasn't there before. He squirmed as Clyde slowly slipped the tip of the blade across his chest, leaving a thin, bloody streak. The man wanted to cry out, but the pain wasn't that bad from the cut. It was more of a burning sensation since it was a light cut. "What do you want?" the man pleaded. "What do I want?" Clyde repeated. "I want to torture you and then kill you." Clyde's bluntness terrified the man even more. "Tell me," Clyde started, "how many people have you carjacked?" The man tried to think of the right answer. The answer that would not lead to more cuts from that rusted, yet sharp tool. "You're the first, I swear," the man said, hoping that would make him seem less guilty. "I see," Clyde responded. He laid down the sharp, rusty knife and picked up another rusty-looking spike tool. Casually, he walked over to the tied-up man, and without saying a word, swung the spike down, ramming it into the man's leg, causing the man to scream out in pain. The woman moaned slightly next to him, slowly coming to. Once the man had recovered from the shock of being stabbed in the leg, his scream turned into a muffled sob. Clyde stood up, leaving the spike in the man's leg, and walked back to the table. "I should thank you," he said. "You made my job of abducting the two of you more justified. Usually, I would stop to help a hitchhiker, then find the right time to incapacitate them so I could bring them here. But you carjacking me first somehow helped remind me how shitty people are. Of course, it did cost me a car, but luckily I own a junkyard, so I have a few running cars, just in case something like this happens, or someone sees my car when I take others." Hoping to keep Clyde talking, so he would talk instead of torturing them, he asked, "What about the car you just crashed? Did you just leave it there? How did you get us here without a car?" An evil smile formed on Clyde's face as she shifted through the remaining tools on the table. "You have a lot of questions for someone who's going to die soon," Clyde replied. He picked up a rusty hammer and walked over to the man, enjoying the fear that grew in his eyes. Clyde's mostly bald head reflected the light that snuck into the barn, and the man could see his own reflection along with Clyde's dark eyes through the thick lenses of his glasses. "2 questions means 2 whacks of the hammer," he said, smiling at the terrified man. "First answer," Clyde said. "I had the car towed back to my own lot. I fortunately also own a towing company." As soon as he finished the sentence, he swung the hammer down on the spike, driving it deeper. The man hollered in pain again. Once the man stopped howling and returned to his muffled sobs, Clyde continued. "I actually had you towed still in the car," Clyde started. "My dumb friend Charlie drove the tow truck, carried both of you in here, and tied you up. He'll be here shortly." Clyde let that sink in for a moment, and then swung the hammer again, leading to another round of howling from the man. The woman groggily woke up to the man's screams, confused as to what was going on. The first thing she noticed was that she was tied up. Seeing that the woman was awake, Clyde walked to the door and yelled out for Charlie. It wasn't long before a huge man walked into the room. "She's awake, Charlie," Clyde said. "You can take her." Both the man and the woman began to struggle to free themselves, but the only one who was able to get free was the woman, and only because Charlie untied her. She tried to run away, but Charlie easily grabbed her and picked her up, threw her over his shoulder, and walked away. "Leave her alone, you monster!" the man yelled at the giant man. With the woman still struggling over his left shoulder, he easily turned around and backhanded the man with his right hand. The man almost went unconscious from the blow, but managed to stay barely conscious. "Leave him alone, Charlie," Clyde commanded. "He's mine." With a grunt, Charlie turned back around and walked out the door into another room with the woman. Within minutes, her screams filled the barn. The man continued to struggle against his restraints, hoping to be able to somehow rescue his girlfriend. Clyde smiled as the man struggled. His suffering of what was happening to his girlfriend was just another form of torture to him. He picked up another sharp, rusty tool and casually walked towards the man. Their screams could be heard a quarter-mile away, but unfortunately for them, the barn was miles from anyone who could help them. It wasn't until early dawn until the screams finally faded, and the silence once again settled in. "Get rid of the bodies, Charlie," Clyde said. "I'm going to get some sleep." When Clyde woke up, he was fully rested. He walked to the barn to make sure everything was cleaned up, which to his pleasant surprise it was. No police ever came to his place to ask about the missing strangers, and when he felt enough time had passed, he climbed back into one of his cars one night and drove the country roads looking for any other hitchhikers. After only a few nights, he was driving down a dark road when he saw a hitchhiker walking along the edge of the road holding his thumb out. "Hi, friend," Clyde said with a warm smile. "Where are you headed?" "To the nearest town, if that's okay," the man replied. "That's perfectly okay," Clyde said. Before driving off, he adjusted the rearview mirror, smiling as he let off the brake and slowly stepped on the gas. I hope you enjoy this reading of my short story, Carjacked. Become a patron on Patron to see the behind-the-scenes recording of this podcast. Please remember to take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Every new subscriber will get a shout-out in an upcoming episode. These short story podcasts are uploaded every week to YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, Instagram, IGTV, Patreon, Reddit, and my website, AntonioGarciaBooks.com. There, you can also order a signed copy of my mystery novel, Sins of the Fathers, and pre-order my upcoming fantasy novel, Black Knight. You can show your support by becoming a patron on Patreon. Follow me on Goodreads, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, Reddit, and Spreaker, all of which are listed on my website. Again, I hope you enjoy the short story, and you join me again next week.